It's hard to keep that stuff straight. Lots of moving around, yeah. And then all the special contracts and yeah. I try to my selling point, or the bias, I don't know what it, my take-home message for what I do publicly is that is the act and the process that is wonderful and rewarding, and not necessarily the nihilism that could potentially take hold when one is looking at how daunting the task is. So for myself, I will continue to say, at least that's what I think, or I guess, let me double check, but I will continue to make the effort because I find it is the thing I live for. So I'll continue to like throw names around and make that attempt. Life is such a process, you know? I'm trying to, my reason, one of my top motivations for not necessarily just playing video games, but I kind of use video games as a vehicle, is to dispel the encroaching nihilism that is rampant in our youth. And sometimes it filters to older like past millennial generations, but generally speaking, understanding what type of behavioral normalization that's occurring with the use of tools like search engines and whatnot, and combat nihilism. Everything is a process if you think about it, because without process there's no action. No action means no learning either. Well, if you think of it like that, you're imbuing in nihilism still. So I'm gonna say not everyone feels the same way you're suggesting, but I would tell you that psychologically, for a vast majority of people, a large majority of things are not about the process, and they usually don't think about the process. I'm not saying it's not. I kind of agree with you from a pragmatic standpoint, like a very pragmatic standpoint. But emotionally and psychologically, the vast majority of the people do not believe things are a process. They believe in an end result, and that end result is normalized by a refined cut and product or service produced imagery. So when you see someone nail a headshot for like the perfectly 20 times in a row, you don't see 10,000 hours of missed shots, for example. So psychologically and emotionally, probably a good majority of people do not believe that statement. Pragmatically speaking, I have no problems agreeing with you. Because in order to reach an end goal, which is the action, if you want to stop at action, it requires a process. For example, my favorite, or not my favorite, but one example off the top that's very trivial and overlooked is when you buy something. Buying something is a process. However, if you make that emotional attempt to connect with someone from that statement, they will say, no, it's not. As in, they don't see the exchange of a creator producing a service or product, then giving it for value that creator and product determined, which is then evaluated by the end user's valuation of that product and willingness to buy it, and then finally as well enter the process of utilizing the value of that product they purchase in order to actualize the initial value they thought it had. No, we're not. A chore is still a process. If someone, in my opinion, if you ask someone that it's a chore, they would use the word grind, and grind would be associated with process. We're talking about deserving and entitlement. So what I mean is, you can try to tell someone that working hard requires a process in order to be successful. However, emotionally and psychologically, someone would just say, I worked long and therefore I deserve to be successful. So they can still pragmatically see doing the work, but they skip how the process impacts what they get in the end. Like, they circumvent it. So, like, it didn't matter what the work was like, which is associated with understanding that it's a process. As in, work can go up and down. You can get worse and get better. You can deviate away and end up somewhere else. So when people focus on the end result, like the big picture, that's kind of one of the dangers of some of the hot takes and generalizations that we have. So when you're saying, for example, everything is a process, that's a generalization that comes with certain circumstances that fails, but not in a bad or a good way. Just it doesn't take into consideration how people could not think everything is a process without breaking down the parts. Like, this is a humorous example. I was playing a game called Koromon, and there was a bird, right? And I was thinking, man, it really looks like any specific bird. So I was going through the birds, and someone said, that's a crow. Like, it's the chord and yeah, so that's a crow. And this person went down this huge pipeline. It's like, well, you know, it's basically a crow, and these are blue. This is supposed to be an allusion to a blue jay. This is supposed to be allusion to a cardinal, but they're all really crows. And I was thinking, okay, but one could also interpret it as something else, right? And I go through the process of explaining how I differed in approaching that, but I totally see their point. There's like, well, basically those birds are also crows. So they remove the process, if you see what I mean. Like, so it didn't matter how the person they're talking to came up with those ideas. In the end, everything is their specific type of bird. So that line of thinking bleeds into everything. Like, eventually it will consume, and that frequency increases. And by everything, I really just mean most of the time. Obviously reflective of the frequency of how you use that thought process. Kind of fun. That person is perfectly happy, so I don't want to give you the impression that you should be thinking in a certain way. Just that person is really happy, probably less so happy with me, but I don't think that will change that person's perspective because they basically just shot me down and then left. Like, that's fair. But what I can say about that is that person was more concerned about the end result. They wanted to come and tell me and convince me that their perspective was well thought out. They did not receive the affirmation that they wanted, and they left. It didn't matter what happened in between. Like, all that stuff probably didn't matter to them. They're like, oh, that guy doesn't understand me. I'm leaving. End. No process consideration. That's kind of video gamey as well. I beat this game, and now it's gonna slough off and wash off in my brain, and I'm off to the next adventure. Fair enough. If you're a checklist kind of guy, the only thing you have to remember is you completed it. It's all good. I follow games because of the creators. I don't necessarily follow the games for the reason of my own completion. Although I say that as a way to empathize with people. I like completing games. They're great. I won't complete it in a manner that they think is the most valuable. The most valuable is the process. It's the experience. The discussions you have in the game. Speaking of thought process, am I bad for this? And one of the reasons I'm bad at explaining things is people tend to say things and exclude many details from their perspective because that is a large part of what your brain filters out automatically. Well, I have a great thing about this. I'll not try to like say too much. You use the word bad. It's bad if it makes you feel wanting. It's good if you're still happy about it. So that will keep it there. So I have no way of garnering whether it's bad or good. You have to ask yourself if you're happy or not. The other stuff, I would say, generally speaking, the things you do with highest frequency tends to be the reflective in the way you think. And when it comes to other people, right, like how you interact with other people, the thing you do with highest frequency is the thing that you often project. So you will naturally end up attracting similar people if you're projecting that type of mindset. So if you find that, this is not all the time, but we're talking about now frequencies, right? So if you feel that the people around you often tend to say things and exclude many details from their perspective, it's often a reflection of you projecting that same type of mindset, right? And if that upsets you, that can be a bad thing. If it doesn't upset you and you feel at home and you vibe with them all the time, it's a good thing. So no wrong or right in this approach. If you want to change that approach, generally speaking, it's often far more reliable if you want to be open-minded and that makes you feel rewarded. Trying to practice that tends to automatically or more frequently have you behave that way. And when you behave that way, you naturally attract people like that. So generally speaking, I have another deep cut. If you want to be a popular content creator, or like if that's something that this is a very common question that most people ask, what I just described about being open-minded is incredibly not popular. It creates nebulous thoughts, it lacks clarity, and it requires so much time to discuss. And generally speaking, a forum like this and those who use the internet for escapism and entertainment are not looking to grind the process. They're usually looking for a non-process oriented form of entertainment, which is being explicitly told what's good, what's bad, how strongly strong-armed to being told how implicitly how to enjoy something and how to feel. So that cuts out a lot of the rigors of process-oriented thinking. So generally speaking, if those things create conflicts of interest, it could lead into that I feel bad because I need to do this in order to get my other thing. But if I wanted to be open-minded, it conflicts with my conflict of interest in reaching out to more people. right? Or similar people. And generally speaking, process-oriented mindsets tend to cause a person to be less projecting. So they tend to be less relatable in general. They're very agreeable and nice people, but they're not very relatable. So what I'm saying is, every time if you share something with me, I'm probably going to try to offer an alternative perspective, which means that you wouldn't necessarily ever feel that I will have a consistent result. You just have trouble explaining things sometimes because I leave out so many things I'm thinking about automatically. Yeah, that's what I mean. If you are when you leave, so if you're aware of those things and you leave it out, then that's usually, maybe I would say it's more heavily process oriented. However, that is something that's self-practiced. So a great approach for that is being more decisive in your audience, right? So in order to feel like you're projecting properly, you would need to or one encouragement would be to increase how efficient you become at selectively deciding whether you want to be agreeable or not. For me, I don't choose to be agreeable most of the time when I'm talking about serious topics. However, when someone's like when someone is hyped about a video game, I would just say, that sounds amazing. I'm glad you're having fun. Until I establish that the person is willing to have a deeper discussion, right? And I take their face value for it. Like when someone comes up and say, I played 1,200 hours of this game and I feel emotionally invested. Well, I will make an attempt to probe for that emotional investment. It would be an open window for me to trust that person, like, okay, I can talk about all the alternative perspectives of this game because there's a higher chance that someone who have invested over 1,200 hours in a game will have like fourth wall outside investment in the game, as opposed to playing 1,200 hours focused in the system. So maybe they'll learn about the developer, the publisher. Maybe they even follow the developer and the publisher for their next project, that kind of thing. But if it's one person that comes in and say, I really like this part of the game, then I will just be agreeable and say, that's amazing. I enjoy that part of the game too. Anybody who approaches another person, in my opinion, or at least approach me and say a specific aspect or generalize a very specific aspect, I would have to first ask how they came about it, or try to determine how they came about it. Because if they generalized and or cite specific attributes, I have to determine if they are open to different opinions or open to a more wider, interesting conversation. If they aren't, then I will just agree with them or disagree with them in a sense, like more like add to it. So if they like this game and they like the combat or the core mechanics of this game, I would say, yeah, I like the core mechanics too. Or the core mechanics, not really for me, but I can see how you might like it. Or how you like it. The fact is, they like it. If they're talking about the dev, then sure as heck, we're gonna end up talking for like 4 hours. Or they talk about the history. Like, one thing I would probably say would be an interesting deep cut topic is how fantasy is always so nonchalantly integrating secular things with religious things or imagery, right? Like, here's an example. In this fantasy setting, it's beyond Pierre, so we're going next level, right? Pierre has, coincidentally, I'm gonna say coincidentally, I don't think necessarily he thought about this, but the idea that he have introduced multiple mechanics of self-healing, right? But generally speaking, in a fantasy setting, healing is arbitrarily attached to altruism a lot of times. Like old school fantasy tends to, and altruism tends to come in the imagery of religion or mysticism, which is still a form of religion and like a cultist like thing, right? But in his inclusion of everything, there's like those who self-flagellate, you know, those who like morale boost, but it's sometimes used as a second wind mechanic to heal again. And then the baby, right? The baby heals by pooping his pants. That stuff's great. And I'm genuinely curious, if I were ever to sit down and interview Pierre, that those would be my like curveball questions. Those would I would probably segment into, okay, let's ask icebreakers, you know, questions that are very mechanical. It's like, what was your inspiration for this game? The Darkest Dungeon, you know, like, how do you feel about Red Hook's Darkest Dungeon? That kind of thing. But then you enter the lightning round, the very like end of the round. It's like, here, what do you think? How do you feel about the depiction of healing in your game? Like, you have some very nuanced examples of healing, which actually is a great stretch from the dogmatic depiction of healing. Like priests, saints, that's great, but he went out of his way to include shamans that heal, right? Arcane power that heal. His mages have the capacity to heal. And, you know, there's the baby, there's actually, I'm surprised he didn't add a vampire, but you know, like life stealing. So he encompasses all these things, and I was always curious about what was his thought process in including all the different mechanics of representations. Like a buff guy would just get a lot of HP and take face damage, but that is a form of defense, versus a defensive guy who like guards and raises his defense, versus one that gets more defensive as they're getting hit. And then you have divine protection, you know, and then negation, and then nullification. So there's so many wonderful themes that you can talk about in this game just alone. And obviously I think about these things when I'm playing this game. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if devs would ever get too offended. I don't think devs would get too offended about this, but mechanics have legacy. So the pragmatic game theory that most people are thinking about, like the mechanics behind the game, so why healing and healing is balanced with offense, that stuff goes real fast, like really fast for me, because, you know, playing lots of games, you see that they have legacy and there's iteration. What I'm usually thinking about that I share when I'm playing a game is all the imagery, all the connection, the history, maybe even future of all these things, right? So like, that's a church. At least that's what I'm leading to believe. But A deep dive would suggest it is a very specific type of church or like religious gathering area. And my curveball thinking is, why this one for the temple, right? Why this one for the temple? It could have been a cathedral. It could have been a mosque. Like, there's so many little things, and I would totally ask them. Yeah. Totally, like, this is called a magicarium, right? As in like a aquarium, like a archive, instead of like an ivory tower or a laboratory. Magic could have been replaced with alchemy, that kind of thing. It's so rich, like there's just so much. And I wanted to say most of this is because I left all that out. And if that makes you feel bad, or like you're having trouble including all that, I like to say, at least me personally, I tend to do the whole, hold it, this isn't supposed to be comprehensive. And I hope you understand that I do this pragmatically by citing the things that are most relevant, or at least I believe to be most emotionally and intellectually relevant at the time. However, if you sit and chill with me over the length of an entire game, you'll probably realize that I leave things out all the time. And they're left out and implicitly understood that I leave a lot of things out, because then I would never finish this run. Or never in quotations. I wouldn't complete this game if I were to account for everything I'm thinking about automatically. One thing's for sure though, it's one of those like process moments. I will continue to try to become more and more efficient over time. Better empathy allows for efficiency, right? Better efficiency in empathy allows you to prioritize things, and prioritizing things enables one to appear organized and well-spoken, while not necessarily becoming too esoteric and long drawn when appropriate. For myself, I don't see myself as someone who can appeal to 100 to 10, like to millions of people, because I prefer to be long drawn. I do this for legacy, personal legacy building. So I play games as a form of recording things that I'm afraid that I might forget. So not only leaving things out can be a negative experience, which is, I would say I do emotionally feel negative, right? I do feel negative. So this is a point that I can empathize with you, where it feels legitimately bad to leave things out. However, to counter that, in my mind, is I leave things out in order to be more concise and relatable to people in public. But I record these things for posterity, just in case if I left something out habitually, it'll cause me to forget those things too. And that's the crux of my greatest fear, which is talking about something, but if I leave it out of conditioning, I normalize that. And when I normalize that, I might forget it instead of actively doing it. So I actively do it while I'm recording at the expense of, 3-hour digressions about the state of mind that's required to play Tinyfolks, which really is a incredibly short game. Like, short and affordable, right? That's just the nature of it. So overall, I'm very content and happy. I think if you're talking about an emotional problem, I would say finding the best normalization or habit forming behavior that can alleviate the idea that it's a trade-off, it's a compromise. Leaving things out makes you more time efficient. Finding skills to increase the efficiency of saying the thing that is very relatable to the other person can help with that. And yeah, at least that's my attempt. Anyways, going back to this. All right, we're gonna take out the boss now. I have 5 units. Do I have 5 slots? No, I don't. So 1 unit. Oh, this guy is increasing his weapon. No. We're gonna keep the warrior for upgrading, and then we're gonna take out. I'm really scared to put the baby third. Oh no. Wait, what would that? I think this is fine. Because the poopy pants... Okay. Alright. So... Yeah. I don't remember what it costs. Oh no, wait. Hold up. Hold up. The troubadour has to be... Oh no, the troubadour has to be next to the saint. So I can't do this without... I can't do this format without a 5th member. So we'll do it this way. I'm still giving... I'll take the risk. I guess we're giving the shoe to Bill. Julian's getting this, and then... Okay. Working on making it better at explaining by giving a more detailed concept. That's fair. It would definitely be a better explanation for sure. Or perhaps the best at the time of needing to explain things. I think in terms of how being concise and explaining things in that, my professional background would be something that's worth mentioning because it's really relevant to how I explain things. And even then, not everyone's very receptive to my professional background of choice, so I have to be realistic on how receptive that is, and I need to refine what I done professionally into a more appropriate format in order to relate to those who don't who pay attention for more than 10 minutes at a time, right? 10 is an arbitrary number. I just thought 10 would be a great nice not it's not literally 10. Okay, we're gonna go after the ghost. I think we can go conservative at first. It's kinda... Light storm. Okay. I'm still not digging the way I have this set up. It does. It does have to do with public speaking. It also have to do with writing and teaching. However, I don't do it anymore for the moment. Although, coincidentally, the thing I choose to do is public speaking after the fact. But I originally taught speak and write. It's the predominant skill that got me into the... It's what enabled me to be successful at it. And then now I still technically... right now, I still technically write, talk publicly, and work communication and like communication skills in general. So in any form of communication, that's what I do most of the time. I watch YouTube videos, play video games, watch movies and stuff for the sake of doing that. Being a better writer, communicator, and stuff. So any career that deals with that is something I could consider pivoting to. Which, as a human being, it's kind of hard to find those skills dispensable, if you know what I mean. There are extenuating circumstances, but if you're gonna ask me for my personal bias and pre-selection, a life skill is communication. It's absolutely paramount in every form. So it's not trying not to encourage nihilism, but communication in all of its form pays out. It's, you know, it's one of those things. Time invested in communication returns in investment adequately. There's definitely to say about diminished return though, but we generally aren't talking about people who are having diminished return in communication. Yes, it is downplayed in many wage jobs. Yep. That's the and not we're gonna go even more specific than wage jobs, because wage jobs have changed now, like the nature of wage jobs. Labor jobs is downplayed, so it's a subset of wage jobs, but we're gonna close it up a little bit more and talk about labor jobs and fine crafts, like any form of product production. Communication is downplayed. It's not as downplayed as it once was. Now that, due to the advent of sole proprietorship, the explosion of sole proprietorship ability, generally those who succeed ends up upplaying the necessity for communication. Because in order to become a successful sole proprietor, which is the main form of content creation, one eventually encounters or become challenged by their ability to communicate. Yes, it's almost non-existent under the traditional setup. It is less of a case, but it was the trend that was carried over in terms of labor jobs. Yes, especially labor wage jobs. Nowadays, though, it has become less and less. So now communication is growing even more than it's ever been. And naturally speaking, I am going to emphasize that. And the marketable skill that I'm working on is not necessarily using that communication, but teaching that communication. And usually teaching communication tends to be more intuitive and automatic, I guess, if you attempt to normalize it. And in order to normalize communication, you have to use it. So technically, I am using communication, but I'm using it in a very deliberate way that one day maybe can indirectly demonstrate, right, how to do that just by exposure. So some of the influencers nowadays that largely de-emphasize that, like, because they're working on establishing, now they're established, they're using improved forms of communication, and as they're naturally doing that, they're increasing its spread to emphasizing how great communication can do. So I would talk. That's fair. Yeah. That's usually that's I want to say that's a fair presumption that I make most of the time when it comes to meeting someone on a forum like this, right? So it is not a coincidence that I've mentioned all the things I just mentioned. It was deliberate in making you feel that it's relevant. I talk about this stuff a lot because I'm on a forum that this would be the likely case. As opposed to talking about like scientific writing, which that is my professional background, is scientific writing. Which is very unempathetic, by the way. So one of the trade-offs in scientific writing is it does not exude empathy. That is a acquired communication skill through teaching. Scientific writing does not exude empathy very much. The goal is to not do that. So it's not bad or good. The appropriateness of scientific writing is to avoid empathy. So it's to avoid what I just did now, which is to talk about something that I was very, very confident that was relevant in this discussion. Alright, so I guess I'm gonna poopy pants up here. And then go into the boss. Oh no. Oh wait. Poopy pants will stay up. Alright. I'm to take out the boss. The dead spirit. I don't have any brandy. Should've got some brandy. Guess we're shoulder rushing. And then it'll get healed by... Oh, you know what? He's still a troubadour. I could have ministered. Minstreled up. It's okay though. We also have a miracle. Yeah, I needed 3 positions. Shoulder. Sacrifice. Ooh, that's a little dangerous. That's a wee bit dangerous. It's okay, I have pots. Okay. Still have the miracle. Am I holding on to this miracle? I mean benediction. Yeah, let's hold on to the benediction. One more turn. Restack poop. Okay. Shoulder. Greed? Cool. Benediction. Cool. Hey, I got an amulet. Nice. The last two jobs I had both do not want me to say anything unless something goes wrong. Oh, okay. That's interesting. This is kind of a bold statement. When it comes to not saying anything, like if I was in a, say I was in a position like that, I would find a way to communicate that didn't involve the form of communication that person mentioned. So it can be misconstrued as being a sycophant or someone who is brown-nosing, I suppose. However, there are very tactful ways to communicate without doing the thing that you said you're not allowed to. So, for example, volunteer work. I do, from time to time, I have done a lot of volunteer work in my life. And generally speaking, when you're a volunteer, often, well, it's no wage, right? But you are committed to doing whatever you want, right? And, oh, well, yes, volunteer work can be great fun, but I don't actually do volunteer work for fun, obviously. But here's the thing. If an employer told me that, yeah, you know, just keep working, don't say anything if something goes wrong, well, don't say anything about the work. But I would probably go up to the person and occasionally say like, hi, how's your day? It's great. Or even communicate in a different way that doesn't deal with work. Because generally speaking, when someone says, don't talk to me or say anything, it's usually associated with their emotional state with work. Communication is not simply about objective tasks. And that's kind of the thing that I was talking about with scientific writing. Scientific writing is appropriately non-empathetic. It does not exude empathy. When you're objective and it's appropriate to be objective, that's kind of my interpretation of a boss or like a superior telling another person, don't bother me unless it's something wrong. However, it didn't suggest to bother them when something is going right. So that's part of communication. It's the upper level of communication, is to express empathy when appropriate. So generally speaking, I am not the best worker. I think that goes without saying. In all my years in my jobs, right? I did have multiple jobs. The impression I left and the favoritism that I garnered, it wasn't necessarily because I followed orders or I did what I was told. I generally went above by utilizing communication. So like, it wasn't, not only do I just look out for things that are going right, I also go out looking for things that are going wrong, or I make things more right than they already are. That's how you would communicate indirectly without necessarily literally and explicitly communicating with your boss. And that's kind of, some would say that's self-improvement, self-motivation. It all comes in that guise. But most of the things humans do is either to the self or interpersonal. So streaming is an example of interpersonal communication. What you choose to do, regardless of who sees it or not, is a interpersonal relationship with yourself, technically. And then what you choose to practice and do is still an interpersonal relationship with anyone who's public. So when someone tells me to not bother them when things go wrong, my ultimate interpretation is I should do things that go right and share it with them. If they're not receptive to that, then you'll find out. But naturally speaking, what you're doing is you're doing something they didn't explicitly tell you not to, so if they're objectively minded, they'll be fine with it. But subjectively, interpersonal relationships benefit a lot from opening a person's perspective to not the worst case scenario. Now, humans have this imbalance where it's generally ultimatums as opposed to optimism. So it's going to be rarer, but it does happen. Don't bother me even if it goes well. You won't find that, so we're not too much. So we won't entertain the idea. I like to be pragmatic about focusing on things you can do more relevantly most of the time, because as I mentioned and you agree, time is a precious resource. So when I'm in a wage job, minimum wage job, and I'm a labor worker, I suck at labor, by the way, so I don't have great but I do have empathy. So I wasn't the best worker. I don't have the most stamina. I may not even have the best communication skills. However, I can think of things I can do that explicitly are allowed. It could be inferred sometimes, like that you're not allowed to do that. That's fair. Just I get better wages, quote unquote, or there are other things that aren't monetized by wage that allows me to reward myself, if anything at all. So for example, I will end up doing better work. And yes, some people say, why you do better work if you just get paid the same anyways? It's like, well, I'm investing in people. I'm not investing in my wage. There's a big asterisk to this. You can become emotionally compromised if you are strapped for resources. So we're not talking about people who are underprivileged here. So those who are desperate for better wages, that can create an emotional compromise. We're talking about someone, that's why I chose volunteering, because generally volunteering involves someone who's in a privileged situation. And sure enough, even in volunteer work, it led to that same situation where people are stressed out, is largely because they're using it as an incentive for something else. I volunteer not for the aspect of having fun. In fact, I expect to not have fun in volunteer work. I expect to be very rewarded after volunteering work. But volunteer is an aspect of giving something. You don't receive anything for volunteering. So the only reward I bottom line get is the reward of doing it. The process of volunteering. I volunteer at a convention annually, and that's not what I see most of the time. I think 70 to 80% of the time, volunteers look for adequate incentive and rewards for doing volunteer work. I don't. I literally expect that volunteering is going to cost money. It's going to cost my time. It's going to make me feel worse because to make other people feel good, I have to sacrifice things, and sacrificing feels bad. And only till afterwards do I get any form of psychological reward. If anything else happens, it's extra. As in, wow, that was pleasant. Like, someone gave me something, and I kid you not, it happens all the time. When I finish volunteering work, some stranger, a couple strangers this year, gave me something because they really appreciate it. It's like, that's wonderful, but it's not necessary because I'm a volunteer. And this specific thing is at an anime convention. I go every year. I think this year was my 16th consecutive year. But I only started volunteering. I was given the privilege, right? Volunteering is a privilege. I was given the privilege to volunteer like as like an on-staff thing 7 years ago, something like that. And I've been doing that ever since. Volunteering is a privilege because you have to be privileged in order to volunteer appropriately. This goes without saying, there are so many kind people who volunteer at this convention center, but they are in no emotional state, not an appropriate emotional state to be volunteering, but they still do their best. So they are incredibly kind, just not in the most emotionally stable environment to do so. And that's usually the realistic part of volunteer work. So I accept that. It doesn't change the pragmatic approach to volunteer work. It's a thing I practice a lot. So I actually go there. One of my alternatives, if I'm volunteering, I'm helping con goers go to the anime convention, right? The alternative objective is to go to the convention and meet emotionally compromised volunteers so that I can offer a listening ear. Like I meet the same people over the years, get caught up in stuff. But most of the time, I want to be there available so that they can share and feel better volunteering. So I'm actually, the alternative is to volunteer for the sake of being a volunteer for the other volunteers. Like, oh, I know someone's gonna have a crappy day sitting next to me after 6 hours of registration, like things like that. But I'm volunteering for that reason too. I'm trying to be supportive of the other volunteers because I have no emotional compromising, right? I prep myself for volunteering. Just like a fun little side thing. I don't volunteer when I can't. As in, if I'm worried about my job, I'm not volunteering. It's very acceptable. It's reasonable. If I'm strapped for money, don't volunteer. Because that creates... The other volunteers can be great. Yes, to some extent. So this is gonna sound a little bit egotistical. However, if you try to put yourself in my shoes, generally speaking, the vast majority of volunteers in a volunteering situation would be in a mindset lower than mine, as in emotionally. So it's great fun knowing that I can help other people, including the other volunteers. I don't necessarily think they're great for volunteering. It's nice to see that they feel better after volunteering. And pragmatically speaking, I always feel worse after volunteering. Like the literal volunteering, I will always feel worse. That is the telltale sign that I have made sacrifices for volunteering. And then after I finish volunteering, that's where the reward comes from, all that stuff. So generally speaking, if in the moment, I would say volunteering is never fun for me. If I had fun volunteering, I could do better. And then afterwards, it's great fun in retrospect because I did my best. I can feel that I've taken on more all the burdens of why they offered people to volunteer. Can you have both? Well, in my mindset, you cannot. Because one takes from the other. It's a duality of volunteering. So if anyone like texts me in the moment, I will literally tell you, like, you know, all these problems are happening, we're dealing with it, and that's it. You know, it's always gonna be at the expense. I just choose to be as content as possible. So like, I'm going into it extremely happy, and I maintain that level, or like I try to maintain that level as much as I can, and then when I come back home, incredibly exhausted, just out of my mind, just take a break, sleep, chill, recover, and it's incredible because all I have are stories of what I did as a volunteer. I bring it back all the time, so there's a lot of things to talk about, but maybe a little too much for this particular day. And I bring up those stories, you know, here and there. It's always fun to bring up those stories. I'm looking for potions. We need to make potions now. Because we need brandy. And need one of rune carving. But we can get the third tavern. Well, need more night training, but that's not that important. We're gonna go to the Crystal Plains soon, so we're gonna need our artifact production. And I keep forgetting that I can upgrade the baby. I still don't know what PV stands for. What could PV possibly be standing for? PV. Yeah, it says plus 10 PV. No idea. Oh, right. I need to face train 300 gold. Get 300 gold from selling leather. Strings? No, I need strings. There it is. Alright. And then we're gonna get our minstrel. And then we have a priest left over. And our warrior. Okay. That's good enough. I have a story from when you volunteered. A magpie got in the venue I was volunteering at. Oh, dang. Summer, so the magpie was icy. Because the venue was large, spent close to an hour trying to get it outside. Oh. Did you how did it go? Give me some details. Knight, gonna grab the amulet. The warrior. Probably defense. Baby. Guess we're just constantly taking risk for resources. The priest. Healing. We got bandages. Nice. Alright. So I think we're gonna run it back on the ancient runes to get amulets. He used a towel. Eventually became winded and was standing in a corner. So he threw a blanket. Aww. That's cute. Well, I'm sure that magpie was very grateful. That sounds like a viral video. That's super cute. Oh, I think I can get this without any injuries. The heck is Banshee? Oh, you don't see a Banshee. Okay. Okay. Ah, can I? Nice. Flawless. After the magpie was called, it was super calm. Aw. Oh yeah, yeah.